Eminem wanna be ass rapping.
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone.
Good morning and welcome to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. Today is Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. James, DJ Exclusive, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Brother Ben. How you live? Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon. I love that crap, bro. I'm sorry, dude. I had to do it.
Hey, man. Hey, you might have to do the next voiceover, man. You sound doing the guy who did that. I love it. I love it. Good morning to everyone across all the chat rooms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. And if you're listening to the podcast after the fact, good morning to you as well. Rebecca is not going to be with us today. She is going to get her vaccine. And we want to encourage everyone. Yeah, exactly, man. We want to encourage everyone who has not gotten their vaccine yet to please do so that we can bring ourselves out of this pandemic sooner rather than later. We will be joined later on in today's episode by Georgia Fort. She will be joining us around the 9 o'clock hour to help discuss all the stories of today. I want to begin with Joe Biden. And it appears as though he may have given up on the idea or outright rejected the idea of forgiving student debt. We want to file this possibly underneath another broken promise. Biden is reported to have given up on including student debt forgiveness in his budget proposal. Senators Warren and even Senator Schumer have urged him to support this issue. Now, according to the International Business Times, the following: the pledges Biden made during his campaign, including health care reforms, raising the estate tax, and forgiving significant amounts of student debt, are all expected to be left out of his upcoming budget plan. In an interview with columnist David Brooks, Biden seemed to be further at odds with the progressive wing of his party when it came to the idea of student debt forgiveness. Now, in that interview, Biden, who previously had rejected the idea of forgiving all student debt, went even further and rejected the proposal by Senators Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer, who have urged him to forgive up to $50,000 in debt from all borrowers. Biden's excuse: he doesn't think the public should pay for those who willingly pursued more expensive educations. And this is his exact quote. He said the following: the idea that you go to Penn, referring to University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League, and you're paying a total of $70,000 a year and the public should pay for that, I don't agree. Biden had previously stated that he would look and see if he had the authority to cancel up to $10,000 for borrowers, as well as cancel debt for students at public colleges and historically black colleges and universities, according to Forbes. Meanwhile, amid reports that Democrats have begun negotiating with themselves yet again, bringing down their own proposal for Biden's infrastructure bill from $2 trillion to $1.5 trillion. I want us to take a listen into this clip from Jen Psaki as she addresses this shift on the infrastructure.
And just lastly then on the issue of infrastructure, you've cited the fact that you've cut the proposal by $550. Yep. But a lot of that is going into other bills. So is it really a cut if you're planning on putting that money elsewhere in other legislation?
Some of it is, not all of it is, and we've certainly come down from our proposals, and there's also bipartisan support for a number of those proposals to move them forward. So at the end of the day, though, we have put forward a proposal. We've put forward a way to pay for it. We have come down from our original proposal a great deal, and we look forward to Republicans putting forward their own counterproposal so we can continue to negotiate.
So this is an ongoing process of Democrats negotiating with themselves. Now, we'll see to what extent these bills, the future bills, will contain some of these key proposals that they cut out of the current bill. But the Democratic Party is on a timeline. They have a clock that they're having to beat because there's no guarantee that these bills will get passed after the midterm election. It's difficult enough to get them passed now. But what doesn't make sense is the fact that the Democratic Party is continuously negotiating with themselves because as it stands right now, they do have the majorities necessary to get everything that they want accomplished if they were willing to abolish the filibuster. It's not just about these budget proposals, but it's also about H.R. 1. It's also about the fact that Republicans all across this country are absolutely attacking the voting rights of many Americans, specifically Black Americans. And if the Democratic Party is not willing or unable to abolish the filibuster in order to protect voting rights, then it's very likely that they will not get anything else done, no matter how far they decrease the amount that they want to spend on the infrastructure package. One Republican floated the idea that they will be willing to adopt a $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which is $500 billion less than what Joe Biden is already negotiating with himself. In other words, the Democrats negotiated with themselves to come down from 2 trillion to 1.5 trillion. And then Republicans said, well, if you go down to 1 trillion, then we'll give it to you. To me, it seems like another example of Lucy holding the football out for Charlie Brown. And again, the Democratic Party is going to try to kick it and expect the Republican Party to engage in good faith, but they are as foolish as Charlie Brown. Now, in regards to what Joe Biden really thinks as it pertains to the left wing of his party and the base, he's consistently making it clear that he is not in lockstep with the progressive left. CNN took up the conversation, and it was rather interesting as how they posed it in terms of the divide, the ever growing divide between Joe Biden and the left. Let's take a listen in.
But it is distinct from the progressive trends in the Democratic Party as well. I mean, emblematic of this is that there's a fight about infrastructure and Joe Biden's planning on paying for it. Now, he's arguing with Republicans about how to pay for it, but the progressives in the party would argue there's no need to worry about paying for it because the extremists in that side at least say that you can print all the money you want. Mm-hmm. So it is an interesting deflection, dichotomy in the Democratic Party right now where Joe Biden is a modern liberal, not a progressive.
And also, Paul, this worldview also impacts, as Margaret notes, how he approaches domestic issues. Brooks writing again, quote, so has Biden now become a straight up progressive? Biden certainly doesn't think so. The progressives don't like me because I'm not prepared to take on what I would say, and they would say, is a socialist agenda, unquote. So, I mean, and he actually says in that article, like, there's no reason why taxpayers should pay for $70,000 for somebody to go to the University of Pennsylvania, which we should note is where his son Beau went, and also a bunch of the Trump kids.
Yeah, I think he's got it exactly right. You know, we in the media, we pay a lot of attention to the Twitter left, and they're important, and I love them, and I'm on Twitter, blah, blah. But the truth is, the heart of the Democratic Party is African Americans, other racial minorities, who tend to be much more moderate. Biden knows that. That's why he's the nominee. Bernie Sanders won 19 contests, the socialist, Democratic socialist, against Hillary. 19. He only won 9 against Joe. So Biden definitely is in sync with the heart and the base of his party.
Paul, Margaret, Jake, all of you have not a clue as to what it is to be a black person in this country. So please, never again for the rest of your existence ever try to use black people as a shield against your centrism. Black people are progressive. We have had to be progressive simply because of our existence here in the United States of America. That clip in particular actually almost sent me flying across this screen, because the absurdity of this entire conversation about asking this government to forgive student loan debt, which is an undue burden on the entirety of this country. We are over $2 trillion or approaching $2 trillion in student loan debt, much of which is a burden on Black people. And it's a burden on working families who try to educate their way out of poverty because America told us that was the way to get out of poverty. And the truth of the matter is it absolutely was not. It was simply a way for this country to be able to secure an obscene amount of interest wealth on our backs. Paul, I forgot Paul's last name, but for him to say the face of the Democratic Party is black women are the most educated group. Therefore, they also carry an extreme amount of student debt. And there's not a Black person in this country who is operating in good faith who would not look at this government and say, wait a minute, you have had the capacity to forgive student debt all of this time and you aren't doing it. And it's not as though this is a giveaway, because as soon as that debt is forgiven, those dollars go somewhere else. They will go to housing. They will go to living expenses. It will go right back into this economy. And every single one of them knows that. The second thing that they're trying to peddle here is that we are extremists here on the left. No. It is not extreme to argue for Medicare for all. That is not extreme because every other major developed country, rich country on the face of this planet is giving their citizens Medicare for all. We are the only perverted, grossly, malignantly greedy country that allows the healthcare industry to exploit the sick and the dying for profit. That is extremism. Demanding Medicare for all is not extremism. Demanding that you get the burden of $2 trillion off of our necks is not extremism. It's actually good economic policy. But there are too many stakeholders who have their money, their hands in the cookie jar, trying to get even more wealth at our expense, who are too entrenched in the system to actually allow Joe Biden to do something good for the people. And so now Joe Biden is joining in the chorus. Sorry for all the liberals who love Joe Biden. I just got to tell you the truth about him. He is using a straw man to say we don't want to forgive the debt of people who spent $70,000 a year to go to an Ivy League institution. OK, what about all the rest of us who went to state schools and we started out with $30,000 in loans? And now, because of interest, that has gone to $60,000 that we owe. What about the people who went to community college and had to pay for that? People who went to regular, ordinary schools and did exactly what this country said we needed to do. And they spent their money, or rather they took out these loans to get themselves an opportunity to get ahead, but they're paying more in interest right now than they ever took in principal. That is how broken this system is. And the next balloon that is getting ready to explode is the student loan debt. And it's going to backfire on this party because they have the ability. The Democratic Party has the ability to do what is necessary for the people, but they don't want to. And they're blaming it on the extremists in the party. Now, I'm going to back off of that for a second because I'm telling you, it's the BS, it's the propaganda, it's the lies that's going to get us this country, that's going to make this country implode from within. Here's one good thing that Joe Biden has done recently. Joe Biden has halted Haitian deportations. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announced on Saturday that the Biden administration is allowing 18-month designation of temporary protected status to Haiti. Haitian citizens currently living in the United States will also be eligible, including about 60,000 already previously protected, but who were fearing deportation from Trump-era policies that had not yet been stopped under Biden. It also includes thousands who recently arrived in the United States. Approximately 150,000 people will be protected by this move, which is a great move. Here's a quote from Secretary saying the following, quote, Haiti is currently experiencing serious security concerns, social unrest, an increase in human rights abuses, crippling poverty, and lack of basic resources, which are exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. After careful consideration, we determined that we must do what we can to support Haitian nationals in the United States until conditions in Haiti improve so they may safely return home. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson of Florida said the following, quote, this is what we have been asking for and fighting for, and now the recognition is there. It is my sincere hope that this extension will ultimately lead to a more permanent solution and will continue to push for the passage of legislation introduced by a bipartisan group of lawmakers. She went on to say, and to lawmakers and me, to provide a pathway for certain nationals to receive TPS before January 13th, 2011, to adjust their status to legal permanent residence. In addition, I am calling for President Biden to appoint a special envoy to Haiti to address the nation's political turmoil and bolster Haitian-led solutions to help charter and path a back to democratic rule. So this is a good thing. This is actually an absolutely good thing. This is something, one of the first things we saw Donald Trump attack was the international community as a whole, but particularly black and brown nations. And one of the things that he did was to remove the temporary protective status. And so the reinstatement of this, James, is actually really, really good. But when we look at it, and I heard you were about to get in there, when we look at it in terms of everything that's going on, like, I don't know. At the end of the day, we're going to have to see if the good outweighs the bad, because people need those student loans forgiven. Right? Because go ahead, man. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, finish, man. Because, bro, go ahead. Go ahead, finish.
Listen, man. Listen. The amount of interest. I try to break away from it, but I can't. I can't get away from it.
Right.
I tried my best. But the amount of interest that people are paying on these loans alone is absurd and obscene. And for them to play this game to try to deflect and say, oh, well, you know, we don't want people who are going to these institutions where they pay $70,000 a year. We don't want to forgive them. I don't care what percentage of the population actually went to Ivy League schools. What they want to do is make us jealous of those people, or make us envious, or make us have animosity toward those people and say, oh, yeah, well, we definitely don't want to forgive those people. And if we take that disposition, if we take that attitude and say, oh, well, it's very possible that some rich kid will get their loans forgiven, then what do? We shoot ourselves in the foot, and we end up not getting our loans forgiven. That's the real nasty, dirty, insidious game that Joe Biden is playing with that language, when in reality, there's far more middle class and working class people who took out loans to go to college. And now, because of the interest, here's the other thing. They're trying to make it seem like, oh, you shouldn't take the loans out. A lot of people took these loans out and are paying for these loans, but they've been paying for 10, 15 years, and they haven't even made the dent because of the interest. And that is something that Joe Biden has the capacity to do. But this whole language, man, it's driving. They playing with fire here, James. I don't know, man. What do you think about that student loan issue?
It's crazy, dude, because it's just like they'll do anything and everything they can to get your money. They garnishing my check every 2 weeks. So it's just like, bro, what are y'all doing, man? Why don't you just forget these loans? It's not progressive thinking. It's not left thinking. It's just right.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
It's just right.
Exactly. Precisely. It is not socialist. It is not leftist. It is not progressive. It is just good economic sense, because that money is going to be able to go to some other place. People will be able to afford to pay their rent. People will be able to afford to get their kids into childcare, because we charge people for childcare in this country. People will be able to afford to possibly buy a home one day. There are too many positive things that this will have an effect on the economy in a positive way for them to play this game. Here's the other thing. All Joe Biden has to do is sign an executive order. He doesn't need the Senate. He doesn't need the Congress. He doesn't need the Supreme Court. He can just sign the executive order and wipe away all of the student loan debt. But you know, people had we got adjusted to the idea they're not going to wipe out all of it. They'll wipe out $50,000 of it. And now they're rejecting that notion. It is a game that is played too long and too often, and it is wrong, because most people who are struggling with student loans right now, they're struggling with the interest on the student loans.
Yes.
And that's the kicker right there.
Yeah, you're right, man. And they don't understand that this affects middle class and the lower class citizens of this country. They don't realize that. Just think about that group of people and how many people that is in this country. And if you were just to help, that money would go everywhere else. But they just fail to see that, because they're trying to do what they want to do for the freaking Republicans. Real quick, I'm going to read a couple of super chats as well, too. Infinite content. The Dems are falling into the drain, the public pools, to deny black people the privilege of them getting the same opportunities as white people. See? Absolutely right. And then industrial arts, one distraction after another. Stay focused, y'all.
Stay focused. Absolutely. Man, that story, it really infuriates me. Especially, I think Paul Delgado, whatever his last name is, saying that black people are moderate. No, my white melanin deficient friend, we're radical. We just have tempered our radicalism because y'all have a propensity to kill us when we get a little too radical. But don't ever try to speak for black people again, my dude. All right, Absolutely. let me shift gears because boy, that one little sentence. That sentence almost sent me flying. I want to go to on the international stage before we take our first break. I want to move to Belarus, where amid the backdrop of an ongoing opposition movement demanding democratic and economic reforms, 26-year-old opposition journalist Roman Protasevich was arrested after his flight from Greece was rerouted to Minsk, the capital of Belarus, on Sunday. Protasevich works for a Telegram channel, Belamova, and according to the BBC, he had stepped in to write after another blogger was arrested by the Belarusian authorities in June of last year. Again, according to the BBC, Western countries have accused Belarus of hijacking the Ryanair flight in order to arrest the dissident reporter. Belarus sent a fighter jet to force flight FR 4978, which had departed from the Greek capital, Athens, and was bound for Lithuania, to land claiming a bomb threat. It touched down in the capital of Minsk. Here's a clip of the journalist who was arrested, and it was released by Belarus officials, in which the journalist appears to confess to the crime of organizing mass protests. Let's listen in.
Добрый день, меня зовут Роман Протасевич. Вчера я был задержан сотрудниками МВД в национальном аэропорту Минск. Сейчас я нахожусь в СИЗО номер 1 города Минска. Могу заявить, что никаких проблем со здоровьем, в том числе с сердцем или с какими-либо другими органами, у меня нет. Отношение со стороны сотрудников ко мне максимально корректное и по закону. Также сейчас я продолжаю сотрудничать со следствием и даю признательные показания по факту организации массовых беспорядков в городе Минске.
Okay,
Добрый день, меня зовут Роман Протасевич. Вчера я был задержан.
We're going to play it one more time, and we're going to drop the lower third so that we can see, the audience can read the translation for themselves, and I will read the translations for the listening audience. Let's play it again.
Добрый день, меня зовут Роман Протасевич. Вчера я был задержан сотрудниками МВД в национальном аэропорту Минск. Сейчас я нахожусь в СИЗО номер 1 города Минска. Могу заявить, что никаких проблем со здоровьем, в том числе с сердцем и с какими-либо другими органами у меня нет. Отношение со стороны сотрудников ко мне максимально корректное и по закону. Также сейчас я продолжаю сотрудничать со следствием и даю признательные показания по факту организации массовых беспорядков в
Минске. Now, as he gives this confession, I want you to notice this quote unquote confession that it is based on organizing mass protests. So the very nature of what's going on in Belarus is completely antithetical to what we understand here in the United States, the freedom of assembly. And in fact, the freedom to have opposition. The international debate around this is dividing up along the standard lines of the East versus the West. In response to this news, several international commentators compared this action to that of the United States taking similar actions in rerouting an international flight in order to attempt the arrest of Edward Snowden. In Belarus, however, there is a huge opposition movement demanding democratically elected leadership in fair elections and economic reform. This is in response to what the Belarusian opposition movement and Western governments say the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, who, according to the opposition, rigged the August 9th election. A huge police crackdown has curbed street protests and sent opposition leaders to prison or into exile. Here is the father, of the detained journalist speaking out.
On the 23rd of May at about 12:40 or 12:50, we found out from Telegram that a plane had been hijacked. We'd had some kind of parental intuition that morning that something wasn't right, but we never imagined anything like that was possible. When you find out that your son has been seized in such a vile, terrorist manner, just seized. If someone close to you is taken and they say, we'll put him away for a long time and he'll even get the death penalty, that's really hard. We are really shocked, really upset and depressed by what's happened. But we can't just let it go without punishment.
How worried was Roman that he was in danger?
When you are in the EU, I know this myself, even when you cross the border to Europe, you know you're under international protection. So I doubt Roman ever thought such a thing was possible, that there was a risk he could be seized.
How do you think Roman will actually be coping now with something like this?
I don't want to brag, but we're proud of our son. He's quite a strong character, although he's sensitive. But I think, we hope that he will cope. We hope that he will stay himself, not give in to any of their tricks. We are afraid to even think about it, but it's possible he could be beaten and tortured. We're really afraid of that.
Now, I want to put this again in context of the video that was released by the Belarusian authorities. His crime, his alleged crime, is being a dissident journalist, writing in opposition of the dictatorial regime and organizing mass protests. Jen Psaki, the press secretary for Joe Biden, was asked about this, and this is how she responded. Take a listen in.
In terms of actions, is the U.S. working with NATO? What's the president's approach right now in response to what occurred over the weekend?
Sure. Well, first let me say the president was briefed. He's been kept abreast, of course, but he was briefed this morning during his PDB by his national security team. Our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, also raised our strong concerns on this issue, the actions of the government of Belarus with the secretary, with his Russian counterpart during their phone call this morning, which we provided a readout of, and it was largely, of course, focused on moving the ball forward on getting to a meeting, but he also raised this issue. We certainly, since you gave me the opportunity to do this, condemn the Lukashenko's regime's ongoing harassment and arbitrary detention of journalists simply for doing their job. This was a shocking act, diverting a flight between 2 EU member states for the apparent purpose of arresting a journalist. It constitutes a brazen affront to international peace and security by the regime. We demand an immediate, international, transparent, and credible investigation of this incident. We are in touch with a range of partners bilaterally and through multilateral channels from NATO, the OSCE, UN, EU, and others. And we have nothing to read out at this point, but we will continue to coordinate closely with them.
Is it the White House's belief or assessment that Russia was involved in the Belarus decision on that plane?
I wasn't trying to jump to that conclusion, only to convey that, as Kelly noted, there has been a close relationship. And so as we're discussing ways we can engage to convey our point of view on the actions by the government of Belarus, that we're going to do that through many channels. Our ambassador in Belarus has also conveyed that directly.
And there they were speaking about the allyship between Belarus and the Russian government. And of course, the question was whether or not the Biden administration believes that Russia had anything to do with this. Regardless, the detainment of a journalist who is writing in opposition to any government, any authority, goes against our human rights. This is a human rights violation. We have the authority and the right to speak out against any power structure, regardless of the political or philosophical or economic ideology. Opposition is a human right. We'll talk about this more as we get more information on this, this and other stories. So much more coming up, James, as we get ready to go to break. Georgia Fort is going to join us for the second half of the show. She's going to hang out through the after party. We have a lot of more stories to cover, more like it or not, after this.
Good morning again, everyone. Hope that you are enjoying the show thus far. Before we get into the music, I want to go ahead and get our new super chats in. Get our new patrons in, y'all. So here we go. New patrons for yesterday. We have Lateef M. Brother Lateef. Sub to both of Patreon accounts. Shout out to you, Lateef. We appreciate you, man. Bernie Hart Dragon, our new Twitch subscribers. We have WTF Canuck, who subscribed with Prime. Brown Coat Blue, who subscribed 2 months with Prime. The Chicken Fried Dragon, who gifted a 3-month subscription to Progressive J Log. Shout out to Chicken Fried Dragon. We appreciate you. And Satan Worshipper, the way they spelled it, SEITAN. Satan Worshipper cheer 1 bit. We appreciate y'all so much, man. You too can become a patron. You too. can become a patron. Go to patreon.com/likeitordnot. Patreon.com/likeitordnot. If you want to continue seeing us looking all this good, looking all this fly, and getting some of that good old talking, speaking, hearing Brother Ben talk, my God, spit that fire, make sure you get that Patreon, y'all. Let's get into the music. Good morning, Mom and Daddy. Good morning, Sensation.
Tell me, turn my other cheek and say sticks and stones may break my bone, but your words can't hurt me. No, you just can't hurt me. No, I ain't been right more than I've been wrong, and it still can't hurt me.
Fairy Girl, good morning, good morning. Hey, make sure that y'all follow our social media pages, Like It or Not Show on Instagram and Facebook. Like It or Not Show on Instagram and Facebook, y'all. Good morning, Justice. Shout out Chuck Diesel. Shout out Rebecca Azor in the chat. Love you, sister. Brother Goku, good morning, good morning. Shout out to Nick, who sent us 150 stars on Facebook. Nick L, shout out to you, 150 stars on Facebook. We appreciate y'all.
Let's keep it real, it'd be better if we just subtract the fake. Yeah, so be a light up on my path and a lamp under my feet. I know my faith strong, but my flesh still kinda weak. When that victory be looking like the verge of defeat, and I feel like disrespect, help me turn my other cheek and say sticks and stones.
Alicia, you know it's our pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing this birthday with us, and happy birthday again, Zion. Hope you enjoyed your day.
This can't hurt me. No, I ain't been right more than I've been wrong, and it still can't hurt me. No, it just can't hurt me, no.
Nat A, good morning, good morning. Justice, I appreciate you, sir. Good morning. Chuck Diesel, disclaimer. Like It or Not is not responsible for any broken silverware, dishes, or anything else, celebs, furniture, whatever it is. Management, Like It or Not.
Away from you. Come a little bit closer. Yeah, yeah. Come a little bit closer. Yeah. You're a little bit crazy.
Good morning, Anna. Thank you. I appreciate you, Latino. Good morning.
Got to do with it. He comes around, better knock that stuff down. Come a little bit closer. Yeah, yeah. Come a little bit closer. Yeah. So all my ladies who got a brother that doesn't treat them right, put your finger right in his face and tell that man bye-bye. I'm too fly. Fly. Bye-bye.
Y'all, welcome back to the screen. Benjamin Dixon, and welcome Georgia Floyd. Good morning, Georgia.
Hey. Good morning, Georgia Fort. Coming to us live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is it's always good to have you here. Thank you for coming yesterday and today. Like I always wish we didn't have to cover certain types of stories, but obviously today marks the 25th of May marks 1 year since the murder of George Floyd, and you're doing a lot of coverage there. Tell us about what's going on and what you're seeing and your experiences there as you cover it.
Absolutely. Today, the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, we anticipate the community is going to gather at the intersection where he took his last breath. They plan to embrace George Floyd's family and also embrace and acknowledge so many other families who have lost a loved one to police violence. A lot of families from across the country have traveled here. They plan to spend the week here. I've had the chance to see some of them out at some of these events. Trayvon Martin's family, Breonna Taylor's family, Ma'Khia Bryant's family out at these events, and even had a chance to interview the family of Oscar Grant, who was here from California. He was the man who they based the movie Fruitvale Station on. And so this moment, this 1 year anniversary is serving as a time to reflect back on everything that's happened in the last year, but to also acknowledge the amount of work that is still left to be done. We know that there's been these policies that have been brought forth, the George Floyd Policing Act, that just seems to be stuck on the desks of politicians. And that's on a federal level. But we've even seen that same sentiment on a local level, where all of this legislation that's been drafted, that's been brought forth by families and community leaders and civil rights activists, it's just sitting on the desks of these politicians. And we ask ourselves today, what is that resistance?
Yeah. No, seriously, like you're speaking of the legislation, the George Floyd Act, and the fact that we're not getting any real action on it. And it's not really moving. And it actually kind of reminds me of the last segment. And I want to get your commentary on what we were just talking about in terms of the student loan issue. But before I go there, it just reminds me of how there's so much smoke and mirrors when it comes to issues for Black people in this country, from politicians, where they'll run on it, they'll campaign on it, but at the end of the day, when it comes time to actually sign legislation, it's all of a sudden they don't know what to do, or they're not willing to do what's necessary to actually get it done. Tell us, just speak on that, because that is a deep frustration that not only I have, you have, James has, but all across the country. Black folks, we intuitively understand that promises are made to us by the Democratic Party, and promises are rarely delivered on.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that you hit the nail on the head, and we have to name it. What is that resistance? And I pose the question as a journalist, because I really want people to answer that question for themselves. But if you pose the question to me as a biracial woman whose mother is white, whose father is Black, and really looking at this issue, it's anti-Blackness. At the end of the day, there's nothing else. We know that the globe acknowledged the value and the humanity of George Floyd's life a year ago. We know that. We know that the world demanded that we don't go back to business as usual. We know that the world said we must do better. We know that. But do those who represent us in political offices really know that? Do they believe that? Are they willing to use the courage that it takes to stand against their colleagues who want to continue the status quo, upholding it and not changing? And so I think when we ask ourselves what the resistance is, and also knowing some people, incremental change is change, and that we should be complacent and satisfied and content with what's happening, that we got a conviction and Derek Chauvin and people who kind of have that passive mentality, I challenge them to look at how swiftly they were able to pass legislation for the Asian hate crimes, and rightfully so. That legislation absolutely should be in place. That legislation absolutely should be passed swiftly. No one deserves to be senselessly killed because of hate, right? And so same sentiment, that same energy, those same resources should be applied in making sure that we're responding in an adequate and humane way to the death of George Floyd and other police killings. Yet and still, we're here. Today marks a year. It's been 365 days, and there is still no change.
No, that's the thing. I mean, it really, we got the conviction, right? And the thing is though, even during the trial, there were police murders by police officers, and after the trial, right? So, I think at some point the system wants us to be okay with the fact that every now and then, every other year or something, maybe every other 5 years, we get a conviction, and that's supposed to satisfy us. But without this legislation, right, without them getting rid of qualified immunity, without police officers understanding beforehand that what they are doing will lead to time in jail, without police budgets being affected by these settlements, right? Right now, every settlement that every family gets after their loved one has been wrongfully murdered period, by police officers, that comes out of the city budget, right? That doesn't come out of the police budget per se, and it definitely doesn't come out of police unions / police officers. That expense is moved. And so while they don't have any accountability to paying out these settlements, and they still can hide behind qualified immunity, this just leaves us vulnerable yet again to the implicit bias and the downright white supremacy that's driving these police murders. So it's like they want us to be satisfied with a conviction, but they're not changing anything structurally to actually prevent the next murder. And that's what I'm most concerned about, because unfortunately, there's going to be another hashtag.
Yeah, and I think that your concern is valid, and your concern is my concern, and it's the concern of so many Minneapolis residents today who have been tirelessly fighting over the last year to bring forth change. And I think, acknowledge the fact that you have community activists, you have organizers, you have civil rights attorneys who have been rallying around this issue, who have done the grunt work, who have labored and gotten these bills drafted, who have done the research, who have gotten these bills authored, who have gotten community support and buy-in. And the only thing that the politicians have to do is get it passed. Right. Yet and still, those bills are sitting on desks. And not just in Minneapolis, but across the country. This is happening where we are stagnant now, and the momentum is starting to erode. We saw the governor and the mayors all called out this weekend when George Floyd's sister held a rally for her foundation that she started in honor of her brother. They invited local community leaders on stage to, just share and to speak. And every person who was local, there was a stark difference in the messaging. The people who were national had this, this hope, and George Floyd's family is going to meet with the president, and that is due. That is definitely due. But the people who were local started calling out the governors and the mayors, because these men are showing up to the funerals of people who have been killed by police, and they're shaking hands with the family and consoling them while they're grieving. But yet and still, when it comes to actually doing their job and getting these laws passed, now all of a sudden there's a hang up. There's a problem. And it would mean more to the community if they stayed home and didn't go to the funerals and then actually just did their jobs. And so I think that your concern is valid, because I can't imagine, Ben, you're a black man, even asking you, like, how has this impacted you? And turning that to our beloved DJ, you guys are black men. How have you guys been getting through this, seeing black man after black man after black man shot down, and we're having to fight tooth and nail just for a little bit of justice?
James, you want to reply, James? Because it involves a lot of weed. No.
A lot of, honestly, let's keep it real. Call a spade a spade. A lot of smoking, drinking, a lot of tears, and a lot of talking to my mama, y'all. If y'all only knew this, like, the past year and a half, let's be honest. Longer than that. Past 10, 15, 20, 400 years. Let's go there. Yeah. Just talking to mom and just having to get everything right, because if you don't talk to her or anybody else, what can we do? It's just like, scared to go outside. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. And it was like that all last year. It's just like, I'm afraid that I get pulled over by a police officer. They see a big bald-headed black man. First thing they're gonna do is shoot my ass.
Bro, the terror of driving on the highway and having a police car jump out behind you, like, the amount of adrenaline and the pace that your heart runs at is toxic, and probably is contributing to early deaths, right? Just the stress alone. Even if you get pulled over or not, that's the thing. Like, just having them jump out is like, how is this going to play out, right? That's the one side of the other side is absolutely right. It's like, processing what we see, never mind the threat to us, but just processing the level of threat that we see and the amount of lives that are taken, and the fact that we all, at this point, it's happening so frequently. Like I have had a personal friend, somebody who I played music with for, I knew him for 10 years, and we played together every single Sunday for 2 years. Corey Jones down in West Palm Beach, Florida. We played together at a church in Boynton Beach, Florida, killed by the police, right? You know, he got so-called justice. You know, the officer, Raja, was convicted, but at the same time, like, my friend is dead. You know, somebody's son is gone. Somebody's brother is gone. And I'm going to be honest with you, this last year alone, Georgia, I've gone from, it really has an impact on on our mental health. And I say that very openly and very candidly because I was ready to snap on these fools. And I know I'm not the only one. I know there's enough people around this country who saw it. It's not just black folks. It's a lot of folks who saw what they did to George Floyd. And it really triggered something in our minds where it was fight or flight. And we're tired of running. We're tired of running. So.
Well, and I think the thing that was so telling about the trial, right? Everybody in America, everybody in the world was on the edge of their seats watching this trial, and nobody expected Derek Chauvin to be convicted on all charges.
Nobody.
And the reality that we witnessed a murder, we know that we witnessed a murder. We saw it with our own eyes. We saw George Floyd take his last breath, and then we were gaslit. And then the reality that we were not confident in this judicial system producing a guilty verdict for what we knew was a murder. That reality, grappling with that you could witness a murder and not be confident that the judicial system will produce justice. That is sad. That is a sad reality. Yes. And it is a reality, you know, and I feel you. I get anxiety when I am in the car driving and I hear sirens. I get anxiety, you know, because
are they coming to get me?
I've seen it happen all too much, and you just never know. And it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate, but it's a sad reality. And I continuously am challenging myself to be centered in hope. And that can be really hard being here in Minneapolis while all of this is playing out. And then now there's been a little bit of turn of events, to be real. You know, we're here a year later, you know, a little has changed. You know, Derek Chauvin convicted. The Department of Justice is investigating the Minneapolis Police Department. But when you look at like the defund the movement or defund the police movement, I've been challenged by the complexities of that. That was birthed out of George Floyd being killed, right? And the city council here was like, we're actually going to dismantle the police department. But they didn't even have the authority to do that. They never defunded the police. They had all of these dreams and hopes of these other alternative community-led public safety systems that sounded great, but no one ever invested in them. And now there's an outbreak in gun violence, and they're blaming that on the defund the movement or defund the police movement. And so it's like, is there some truth to that? But how could there be truth when the police department hasn't been defunded and when the gun violence existed well before George Floyd? And so, you know, when you see how this develops and how it all starts to unfold, the very things that people were fighting for, you know, people are getting tired. It's a year later and they've already been doing all this heavy lifting, but you still have no legislation passed. The defund the police movement is starting to lose momentum because of these false allegations that it's caused an increase in gun violence. And then even just trying to analyze this all and staying grounded in the facts of things, it's very challenging. I was in North Minneapolis, and I'll wrap this up here, but I was in North Minneapolis yesterday interviewing the grandfather of a 6-year-old girl who was shot in the head and killed. And before we could leave, we had just wrapped up the interview, gunfire erupted in front of us. I witnessed a drive-by shooting. You know, and where are the resources for that problem? How do we solve that problem? And I'll be honest, I've never felt so helpless, but I've never felt so committed to trying to stay centered in hope.
Well, we were talking, you were telling me about the drive-by yesterday. And, one, we're glad that you're safe, right? And the grandfather of that 6-year-old, that he's safe. And just how unbelievable it is that that would happen right there as you're reporting and talking to someone who's already the victim of gun violence, already lost a loved one to gun violence. And it's unfortunate because it happened in the first place and that your life was at risk and his life was at risk. But it's also unfortunate because in the context I think that you're giving it is that it's applied, it's going to now be used to even further delay us actually getting change in the system, right? Because as gun violence happens, every bit of gun violence that happens, except for mass shooters, by the way, and except for the white boys who go out there and shoot up a whole grocery store, that's never really wrapped into a policing problem. They don't look at mass shootings as a problem of policing. They just look at the shootings that happen in black communities as a problem of not enough policing. And I think it's in that dichotomy, right? That split where you see nobody ever says we need to up the amount of police officers in white neighborhoods because, 10 people just got killed in the grocery store. But anytime there's any shooting, and these are these are real people. Like you're speaking to the grandfather, like he lost his granddaughter, 6-year-old. So I can't imagine how triggering and how much trauma what you all experienced yesterday actually just compiled not only on him, but also to you. Right. So you said it right. There's just so many complexities to this conversation. And it's all in the backdrop of today being the 1-year anniversary of Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd. We have a few more minutes here and we can always go into overtime. There's more things for us to discuss and cover, but get the last word on that, Georgia. And then James, if you would, we've had a lot of people chime in on the conversation. We're jumping there. So go ahead, George. I want you to get the last word on that.
I think the biggest thing with today being the 1-year anniversary, it serves as this moment to reflect, to look back, right? And then also to kind of strategize on how to move forward. And so a lot of people have asked me, how will this year be remembered in history? And I think it will be remembered as a racial reckoning. The killing of George Floyd incited a global response, an acknowledgement that Black life is not valued equally to white life in America. And that is a reality that we can't turn back from. Our generation read about the civil rights movement. The generation after us witnessed a civil rights movement. And so I think that we have, if we weren't already, those who denied the existence of racism still in this country, they can't deny it any longer. And so I think that George Floyd's murder is the moment where America had to reckon with its racist history. And I think where we go from here has to be a reconciliation. There has never been a reconciliation for the injustice that has plagued our ancestors, that has continued to plague us and our families and deny us wealth and deny us equal access to opportunities in America. And so I think as we live in this moment, I encourage people to take a moment today to just breathe and be and think about that, but also to ask yourself, what are you doing to be on the right side of history?
That's
there it is.
There it is. Period. Because a lot of people gonna look back and realize a lot of y'all kids out here and your grandkids are gonna have to look back and realize, dang, Pawpaw was a racist. Pawpaw didn't care about Black lives. Nana and and there's so many records of the ignorance, because one reaction to all this is they like to play dumb. They like to play, they make these arguments, and we'll talk about this in a second. Governor Abbott, basically banning teaching critical race theory. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Before we get there, James, the audience has a lot of people chiming in, and I got a little boy running in the room. So, Jeremiah running in the room. Read those comments while I get him out of here.
Yeah, let's see, man. Thank y'all so much for y'all dropping your super chats and everything. So we're going to start off first. Jam Tune from Twitter. Ben, my partner got cancer and I had to quit school. You would think they would have forgave the loans. Nope. She is a cancer survivor and the minimum they are willing to settle for is $16,000. Where the F are we supposed to get $16,000 for an education she wasn't even able to complete? Wow. Yeah, that's really stupid. Angela G. Ben, what do you know about the African Diaspora Development Institute? You should get Dr. Arakana on your show.
All right, we'll
look
research
into that.
Right.
Star Cinder and Amber Layla, we thank you so much. Thank you for bringing the progressive news to us daily. Love you guys. She sent us 50 stars. Then we have, let's see, Chuck Diesel sent us a big old super chat. That's the moderator on YouTube, y'all. This is for the greatest morning show on YouTube, like it or not. Chuck Diesel, we appreciate you. Environmental Coffee House. This show is important to me. I hate when I miss it live, when life gets in the way. I feel the love here. And that's from Sandy. Sandy, thank you so much. And let me see. I think I have one more. Laura Estrada. Shout out to Laura. This place is my church and dance club and therapy session. Love you all, family. Ben, Rebecca, and Bubba. Meet and greet Los Angeles 2021. Let's do it. I am down.
I'm with
it. And lastly, Kish New Experiments sent us a Keep It Up sticker. We got it. Y'all join the Patreon, patreon.com/like it or not, and we'll keep it up, y'all. Keep it going.
I love it. All right, let's because we're already over time, we're going to keep going a little bit more on the public show. If you want access to the after show, Georgia, you going to hang out? You have time to hang out for the after show?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we'll do a few more stories here publicly, and then if you want access to the after show, go to patreon.com/like it or not. Or if you're a patron of the Benjamin Dixon Show, just stay there. The link is already there. Or if you're on Twitch, Twitch, we found out the problem going on with Twitch is that Twitch has removed emailing your subscribers while they do something new with it. And so if you want to get access to it, just send a whisper, which is Twitch speak. I have to learn all these different languages. Twitch, a DM in Twitch is called a whisper. I don't know why that's what it is, but so send our producer David, send him a whisper in his ear, so you can get you the link to the after party. That said, one of the things you were talking about, Georgia, what you were saying about how the legislation sits on the desk. Legislation that is aimed at turning these things around for the black community, especially in terms of police violence. They make promises, but it goes nowhere. Just this past week, or actually earlier this month, May 12th, the Texas Senate passed a bill in the middle of the night that would ban public school teachers from talking about racism, white supremacy, or current events. It's been going back and forth between the Senate, but if it passes, they fully expect, obviously, Governor Abbott, who just signed a law banning abortions after 6 weeks, we have every expectation that he's going to sign this into law. And this is all centered around the conversation about critical race theory, how critical race theory has become the big, bad boogeyman for conservatives. I want to play a clip of Fox News discussing the origins of critical race theory in their own way, such as they can even be objective. But the second part of the video is substantive as they discuss the country being at a crossroads, and whoever wins on critical race theory has the ability to define America. Take a listen in.
The debate is very clearly laid out there, where you have supporters of critical race theory saying that it allows white people to empathize with minorities. And then opponents of it say that it is divisive and, quite frankly, unhealthy to look at everything through the lens of race. And, I was just thinking about a year and a half ago, we weren't talking about this. Nobody really knew what critical race theory was. And that's because it wasn't really called that. It was called diversity or anti-racism training. And if you speak out against that, well, then you're racist. And then certain things started to happen under the name of diversity and anti-racism training. And it was like getting rid of schools named after our founding fathers, or silly little things like Dr. Seuss no longer being a part of, Read Across America Day, and then more divisive things like reimagining our history and never looking at the positives that America has done to overcome all the racism of our past. So it's definitely become a very big debate, and you can see that the more people, the more parents are opening up to this idea, the more pushback you're starting to see unfold.
I listened this weekend to a podcast called The Arguments, done by the New York Times, and it takes an issue and then has two people debate it. Yeah. And so they debated this issue. So apparently, critical race theory is some academics come up with it in the 1970s, and it's sort of been bouncing along. But one of the arguments that was made against critical race theory is that it could be backfiring and actually making things worse.
Yeah, I have been very open about. I think it's not going to come to any surprise to anybody that I think that is true, and I think that the way that we're sort of at a crossroads in the country right now where Democrats and Republicans are defining our country in a very different way, right? There's a lot of Democrats who think that our nation is systemically racist. And then there's a lot of Republicans who think that the United States, the same country, is the most generous nation on the planet. And I think that we're at that crossroads right now, and the side who wins, it's going to be very important. And the way that we define the country, how we view this nation, plays into everything. And that's a big debate that's unfolding.
Sometimes I want to fight my producer.
Let me fix my face.
David.
Yeah, Georgia.
Whew, man, to have Barbie and Karen and Ken.
Barbie, Carrie, and Ken.
That's exactly what they were. Just sitting there talking about race is going to make racism worse. Yeah, for racist people, right? Yeah. Like if us discussing racism makes somebody more racist, then they were, of course, racist to begin with. And then to say that America is the most generous country in the history of the world, to who? White people? Okay, perhaps, but not even all white people. Rich white people. Yeah,
rich
sure.
White people. Yeah.
It is an amazing experience. If you're a rich white person in America, this is the greatest country in the history of humanity. But if you're not a rich white person, and God forbid you're a black person, how has this country ever been generous to anybody? We had to people had to die to get just a little bit of justice that we get in this country. Like our bodies are like laying in the streets. All of our heroes, all of our martyrs, just martyred by this country in order for us to get the little bit of change that we got. And now you got people like Governor Abbott who's trying to sign into law to get rid of it because they have a new every now and then Georgia and James, they come up with a new big bad wolf, right? Years ago, I think this is before a lot of y'all probably even were into politics. It was Acorn. Acorn was the big thing. Everybody's talking about Acorn being this organization that was being run by the socialists and da-da-da-da. That was a big bad wolf then. And then come along, they always find something every other year to be terrified of in order to stop us from getting any progress. That clip was a little triggering for me. What you think, Georgia and James?
Man, a little triggering. And I think this is the thing. Like you said, you talked about racism and race theory, it ignites racism even more. No, let's be real. We're talking about truth here.
Truth.
And it's not just about us talking about racism. It's us talking about truth. It's us acknowledging the history of our country. And when I was listening to that clip, it was like, what the fake news? And we've been dealing with fake news since Christopher Columbus. Since the inception of this country, you look back at what this nation was founded on. This nation was founded on oppression. This nation was founded on racism. This nation was founded on white supremacy, white individuals coming here feeling like they were superior and that it was their duty and their responsibility to civilize a people who had culture, who had their own way of life that worked. And now, even looking back, we have a lot of indigenous people here in Minnesota, and you look at some of the things that they do traditionally, and it's actually a lot better for you. Like their ways of healing are way better than the Western European standard of medicine, and so many fronts. And then when you look at the anti-blackness that is so embedded in what they were just saying, I wonder who gave them the caucasity to have this conversation about race theory without inviting a Black person and getting their perspective. And so that is why, especially when you have media entities that are accused of being biased and one-sided, it's because you have 3 white individuals who have the caucasity to have a conversation about race theory and its place in public schools without inviting a Black person to the table to interject their perspective. I mean, even if they would have invited Candace Owens, at least some credit.
At least it's somebody
trying to make it balanced.
That's what I was gonna say. Because you know who they're gonna invite. They're gonna invite some.
They didn't even do that. They didn't even try. And so while they want to talk about why our kids should be learning or not learning about race theory, we should be asking ourselves, why are our kids learning about Christopher Columbus? Like he was a hero.
Yeah. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's absolutely right. And I mean, and in Georgia, of course, I think it was Newton County or one of the counties here last week. They met with the parents of students to discuss this theory because, of course, it's trickling down across the country and people are signing stuff in the laws undercover in the secret at night that nobody knows about. So it happened here. And, of course, in Georgia, those people showed up and, of course, they got it kicked out of school so they wouldn't get it talked about. And if you would have looked at the audience, I think 100% Caucasian.
Listen, you're never going to let, nobody wants to hear the truth being told by people who have been hurt by them. Mm-hmm. Right? Oppressors never want the oppressed to tell the history. Somebody shared an African proverb with me, and it says, until the lions learn how to write history, the story will always be told by the hunters. And very similarly, right? You just have to take into context. Of course, the people who are the beneficiaries of America as it is right now, they do not want the history told from the vantage point of the indigenous populations of Native Americans. Of course not, right? History told from the Native American perspective is America is a bloody, barbaric, savage nation built on the bones and the blood of their ancestors. Right? Mm-hmm. Let this narrative be told by Black people, then obviously we understand that this America is a bloody, barbaric, savage nation built on the bones and bloods of our ancestors. Right? Let this narrative of America be told by working people around the country, no matter where, like poor people, then it is America is a bloody, savage, barbaric nation built on the labor of our ancestors. This country, the powerful never want the narrative to be told by the powerless. And right now, you have a bunch of people who, and it's the ironic thing, James Baldwin was really good at this. He always put it into context. He's like, it's really sad. Like, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He said, it's really sad for poor white people who really take up these narratives and they help sustain the oppression against Black people. He said it's sad, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, like I'm taking, from a lot of his different speeches, but he said it's sad because at the end of the day, this system oppresses them too. And the only real true benefit that they get out of America is basically that they are white, but they are oppressing the system too, because this country wasn't built for poor white people. It was built for wealthy, aristocratic white people, land owning white men. Right. And so it's really it's sad because they feel as though those people that you're talking about in that town hall here in Georgia, James, they are out here championing the pulling critical race theory out of the schools. But it's hurting them in the long run. The only thing they get to do, think of it this way. The only thing they get out of this is, at least we didn't have to talk about racism. Yeah, but you are like, you're dying of diabetes and cancer and you're paying an obscene amount in rent and you haven't gotten a pay increase in 30 years and all of these other things that are part of this system. As much as racism is a part of this system, they are destroying you, but you can't see it because, like James Baldwin said, at least they're not Black. So it's a game that's played over and over again. And there's a lot of useful idiots who are of the Caucasian persuasion who really, they really fall into this trap. They don't want to talk about racism because they have to see America as this great nation. But hey, America was built on the bones and the labor of y'all ancestors. Matter of fact, Some of y'all got to go to work at the corner store right now for $7 an hour. And you still out here talking about how great America is. And it's because they cannot tolerate having a conversation that actually makes them have to reflect that their ancestors did a lot of savage stuff. Got to catch myself, a lot of savage stuff, right. and that we have to undo it now. So anyway, this is that clip. I want to play one more clip before we move the conversation, and it has to do with Nicole Hannah-Jones. She was denied tenure at UNC, and she's one of the writers, one of the journalists who put together the 1619 Project for the New York Times, and it really gives a historical account of this country from the perspective of oppressed people, from slaves or enslaved people, since 1619, and it shows how deeply rooted. The 1619 Project shows how deeply rooted oppression, slavery, and racism and white supremacy are in this country. And this is Fox News's response. This is a really short clip of Laura Ingraham mocking Nicole Hannah-Jones, who did phenomenal work, but she's literally been denied tenure at UNC because of the board of directors there. The board, they got together, not the faculty approved, but the board got together and said, because of all this stuff that's going on with critical race theory, all this stuff that's going on with the pushback from conservatives, they therefore denied her tenureship. Let's take a look.
19 Project creator Nicole Hannah-Jones thought she was on her way to a tenured position at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Well, until conservative groups ripped the school for hiring her in the first place. And today, the school's board of trustees backed down and declined to offer her tenure. So if you feel like you don't have any power to change the left's cultural takeover, take this as a lesson. You can, and you will. Gutfeld next.
Look. Come back to the 3-shot. I ain't got nothing else to say about it. Like, she celebrated that. She literally defined the problem precisely correct. And then she celebrated as it was as a victory. I got nothing to say about it.
I mean, are we surprised though? Are we surprised? Because
Facts.
This is the resistance. This is how the anti-blackness continues to show itself. It's like we go an inch and then they take a mile. Yeah. And so I am not surprised. And I think that this is a time where we have to continue, again, going back to what I said earlier, to stay centered in hope, because when you hear these messages of how someone does something so accurate and precise and historic, something that I think you could put in a time capsule and open up in 100 years and it would be a jewel, it would be a gem. And it's almost like you are penalized for doing it. I think that it starts to weigh on your psyche of, will we ever get the change that we're seeking in our lifetime? And it can be hard to keep hope, to see people penalized for things that you think that are great, great contributions. So I am not surprised, but we have to, I think, also uplift those who are standing up for us. We have to position those who are uplifting us for opportunities within our own community, reach out, because if we leave it up to this system, they are going, and we saw this historically, even going back, right? History repeats itself. Look at the leaders of the civil rights movement who were assassinated, who were jailed, who were wrongfully accused of things. And so we know that those who stand on truth and speak out and make these contributions for change, they are going to be the first ones who are ridiculed, criticized, tore down. And so we have a responsibility within our own community to lift those people up and give them the acknowledgement that they so deserve.
Whew. Yeah. James, you're about to get in there. Cause man, that's a lot, man. That's a lot, bro. You want to let? Because man, bro, the way they celebrate, they outright just celebrate the wrong thing, as clear as day. She celebrated that like it was like they had a great victory, and I'm telling you, like that level of insidiousness, that's right where this country will fall apart, because they absolutely believe what is good is bad. and what is bad is good. They believe that night is day and that day is night, that the sky is green and the grass is blue. They think they live in the upside down, and they have to sustain that. They have to sustain that level of ignorance, because if they ever engage in these conversations in good faith, they would have to look at the history not only from the lens of their glorious Christopher Columbus and their glorious founding fathers, but they also have to look through the lens and compare it to the history as told by the people who were murdered and massacred by those people. Anyway, well,
and then they have to pay reparations.
Come on, somebody.
You know,
I wish you had the foghorn right there. I wish you had. I wish we had it ready. I wish we had. Say
they don't
it
want to
again.
do that.
They don't.
They don't want to pass up that wealth that they've included, you know, in their inheritances that's been passed down generation after generation. They don't want to give that up. And so that's what is at stake here. I think even as simple as race theory in classrooms, the more people get educated, the more people are aware of what's happening, the more the messaging is unified about the truth of what this nation was built on, the more that the next generation will demand accountability and reconciliation and reparations.
Yeah. Say that again. Just say that first part again for us, Georgia. They need to give us
about the reparations.
Yeah. Say what that. Because you know that's absolutely right. It needed a little amplification there. All right, folks, we're gonna take it over to the
Sam
after party.
Cooke, it's been a long time coming, but a change gonna come.
It's gotta come, man. Because we ain't running no more. Like I said,
count.
Nah, we rather them bills that like fold. We don't want the clay. We need some. Oh man, patreon.com/like it or not if you want to get access to the after party. It is streaming on the Like It or Not channel. Encourage everyone to go over there to subscribe to the Like It or Not channel. We will be streaming on the Like It or Not channel on Facebook as well as YouTube starting on June 1st. James, we got a couple more super chats. Shout out to everybody who's been sending super chats today. We really appreciate that. What they
dropping them like all crazy like today, bro. Just think about the children until it's actually about actually educating them about history. Facts.
Right.
Shantae Townsville, the more we fight, the more they push, because the reality is too much for them to process. So they keep fighting against change, i.e. caucasity. Amen to that.
I love it.
And I have one more. Let me scroll down and find this last one. Boom, Catherine B. Texas already makes it impossible to talk about racism. In high school, 11th grade is the only U.S. history class, but it starts after the Civil War.
Man, that's Texas is wild. It is the wild, wild west still. It's the wild, wild west of white supremacy. And the fact that they really celebrate what is evil, man. These folks really celebrate what is evil, what is clearly evil to the rest. To anybody who has any modicum of human decency, you can look at the things that these conservatives are celebrating and understand that they are celebrating evil, while the rest of us are looking back and we're appalled because we know the truth. We absolutely know that what they are celebrating as victories is really atrocious. That said, James, give us a little music, man. Give us a little music. Georgia, listen, I want you to say get a last word in there. Tell everybody how they can find you and support you. I know you're coming over to the after party, but I want to make sure that everybody who's on the public stream, that they know whether they can find you and support you. And then James, take us away.
Ben. People can head over to my website, georgiafort.com. There you'll find links to all of my social media and more about the work that I'm doing to change the narrative as an independent journalist.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Facts.
DJ Exclusive, it is in your hands.
Yes, sir. Real quick, want to read this highlighted comment from Twitch. The Chicken Fried Dragon said,
I love it.
They don't believe 80%. Right. They don't believe 80% of what they read on air. They just want to keep the racists tuned in so they can sell their ED pills and catheters.
And the diabetes drugs.
Diabetes. All right, so we thank y'all again so much for tuning in this morning. Make sure that y'all stay tuned. The after party is coming up next. If you're already a Patreon member, get over there and get streaming, and we'll get started momentarily, y'all. Like it or not.